Okay, welcome to Foundations of Math 30. This is your host, Mrs. Clausen, and this is our last unit in this, our last lesson in this outcome. It's buying, renting, or leasing. So we want to take a peek at the different options if you want to um, acquire things like maybe a car or a home or pieces of equipment. So you have options available to you. You can buy them outright, you can rent them, and lots of times now you can lease them. So let's just look at a couple of vocabulary words. So to lease something, a lease is essentially a contract for purchasing the use of property, such as a building or a vehicle, from another for a specified period. So you might enter into a lease for a new vehicle. Could be a 3-year lease, and basically you pay an amount so that you can use that car for 3 years. And at the end of 3 years, you either buy it out or you return it to the lessor, the person who gave it to you. The second definition here is equity. So equity is the difference between the value of an amount and the amount still owing on it. So you might think of it as the portion that you own. Okay, so for example, if you had a $250,000 home and you had to make a down payment of $25,000, you'd have $25,000 of equity in the home. Okay, so that is a good way to build your credit rating, your reliability, your dependence on being able to pay things back. An asset. So an asset is any item that's owned or a portion of an item. Okay, so your home can be an asset even if you don't have it completely paid off. There are things like real estate, investment portfolios, vehicles, even valuable art or gemstones could be considered assets, things that could be sold for money. Okay, when we have things, they can either appreciate or depreciate. Okay, so when things appreciate, that means that they increase in value. And if they depreciate, that means that they decrease in value. So some things, like I said, such as fine art, might actually appreciate. So as it gets older, it gets more valuable. Most of the time, things like a car will depreciate over time. The last vocab here is disposable income. So disposable income is the amount of income that you have left over at the end of the month after you pay all of your regular bills. So it's like your fun money, okay, or money that you can spend on anything. So when you're deciding to buy, rent, or lease, each situation is unique, and you should perform a cost benefit analysis of each of the options presented to you. It's impossible to say for sure whether buying, renting, or leasing is the best option because it really depends on the scenario. And you can decide whatever you want when we are doing these questions because there's different reasons for different things, okay? So let's look at this first example. It says a 10-year-old water heater in Tom's house has quit working, so he needs a new one. Tom works for a minimum wage, and after paying his monthly expenses, he has $35 in disposable income. So he has very little money left over at the end of the month. He has an unused credit card, which is actually very impressive considering he has such a small disposable income, but unused credit card that charges 18.7% compounded daily. I'm just going to pull out some of these important. So $35 in disposable income, credit card that charges 18.7% compounded daily. So he needs to get a new water heater. So what should he do? Option A is that he can lease a water heater for $17.25 a month. This includes parts and installation, so there's no other fees other than the $17.25 a month. He could buy a water heater, okay, for $712.99 plus installation of $250 using the credit card. And he can afford to make payments of $35 each month because remember, he has only $35 in disposable income. So we're going to take a peek at his two options. So in A, we want to do a cost analysis of both of them. So for the lease, that's a fairly easy calculation. So he's just paying $17.25. Okay, but what we need to do is we need to figure out, because we don't know how many months he'd paid off for. So in order to analyze it, what we're going to do is we're going to go to the credit card option, figure out how long it would take him to pay it off, and then compare that to the leased value. Okay, so we'll go to the credit card. So we put all of our information into our app. So the PV would be $712.99 plus $250. Okay, $712.99 plus $250. We put that into the PV. You add that up and put it in. The payments that he can make, so this would be negative. The payments that he can afford to make is $35. The Future value of that is going to be 0. The rate on his credit card is 18.7%, compounded daily. So we need to make sure we're using the advanced calculator because the payments are different than the interest compounding. And then the periods is what we'll have it calculate for us. Okay, so when we have it calculate, it comes out to 36.31 months. So to figure out the total amount paid, we take 36.31 and times it by $35 a month. Tells me that he's going to pay $1,270.85 if he uses his credit card. Okay, and then what we can do also is now that tells me that it's going to take 37 months to pay off his credit card because 36.31. So we will perform our lease for the same amount of time, 37 months, which gives me $638.25. So we can see that it seems like the lease is way cheaper, right? He's paying about half of the cost for the water heater over that 3-year span. So, I mean, I would probably recommend the lease at this point in time. Plus, with the credit card, he's using up all of his disposable income, so he has no money left at all. C says, what if the life expectancy of the water heater were 8 years? Would this change your recommendation? So basically, because the thing is with that lease, you pay that money indefinitely, right? So if he buys it outright with his credit card, in 3 years, he'd pay way more, but he would own it. And then he'd be paying nothing for the month after that. Whereas if it goes for 8 years, so we would need to calculate then how much would he pay in 8 years. So this is to answer C. In 8 years, there would be 96 months, 8 times 12. And he's going to pay $1,725 a month. So that comes out to $1,656 that he would pay for it. So in that case, then, well, maybe the credit card would be a better option because he would actually be paying less for it with the credit card. But again, that would be with no disposable income. We also don't know that it's going to last 8 years. We don't really know. So it's up to you to decide what you think, but either of those options would work. Let's look at one more example. So 2 couples made 2 different decisions about whether to rent or buy their home. Helen and Tim bought a home for $249,900. Okay, so these guys are buying. They have negotiated a mortgage for 95% of the purchase price, so they need a 5% down payment. The mortgage is compounded semi-annually at 5%, has a 20-year term requiring monthly payments, so we need the advanced calculator because our term compounding and payments are opposite. And then we have Don and Patrick who are renting for $1,600 a month, and they'll renew that rental agreement yearly. Okay, after 3 years, both couples decide to move. Helen and Tim discover that the value of their house depreciated by 10% over the 3 years. We want to compare each couple situation. So basically figure out how much money did they put into it in the 3 years here. So Don and Patrick have the easiest scenario to calculate. So let's look at that one first. So, if I take a look at Don and Patrick, because they just are renting, right? So they are renting, paying $1,600 a month for 3 years, so times 36 months. They're going to pay $57,600 over the 3 months. Okay, fairly self-explanatory. Now, Helen and Tim is a bit more of a complicated scenario. So we need to first figure out how much is their mortgage actually for, right? So they had to make a 5% down payment. Okay, so let's just calculate that first of all. The down payment is 5% of the $249,900. So that comes out to be a total of $12,495. It's my down payment. Sorry, I'm just checking my answer key. $12,495 is my down payment. So that means that my mortgage is actually for $249,900, take away the $12,495. So my mortgage is actually for $237,405. Okay, so we're going to use our TVM calculator to calculate my mortgage payments first off. Okay, so Make sure you're putting in present value, payments, future value. Rate and periods. Now, here it's a little bit complicated. When they first negotiated the mortgage with the bank, they thought that it was going to be over the entire 20 years. So we're going to first figure out how much the original monthly payments are. And then we'll have to figure out how much, because after 3 years they decided to leave. We'll have to do another calculation to figure out how much they actually have paid off on their house. Okay, so the present value of that mortgage was negative $237,405. We don't know the payments. The future value we thought was going to be 0 because we were going to pay it off at a rate of 5.5%. Now that's compounded semi-annually, so make sure you change that. And 20 times 12 is 240. So when I do that, it tells me that my monthly payments are $1,624.78. So if we compare them to Don and Pat, they're paying just slightly more for owning their house. So in the beginning, it seems like a pretty good deal, right? Now the problem is that they decide that they're going to leave after 3 years. So then what we need to do is now we go, my present value of my house is negative 237,405. My payments are positive 1624.78. We're going to calculate the future value of the house. The rate is 5.5%, and this time I would pay it off monthly for 3 years, so I have only 36 periods. And when I do that, it comes out and tells me that my after 3 years, that the amount of my mortgage, or what's left owing on my house, is $215,999.52. Okay, so basically we figure out how much, so I could sell my house and figure out how much my profit would be at that point in time. So what we need to do is figure out how much they're going to sell it for now, because remember, it has depreciated by 10% over the years. So what we're going to figure out is that the new value of the home if it depreciates by 10% of that original, like 10% of the original value of the home, right? We lose that. So if I subtract that amount from my home, I figure out that the new value of my home is $224,910. Okay, so I could figure out then that I could sell the house. So I'm going to sell for $224,910, and I'll subtract what I'll pay off the bank then, what I owe, $215,99.52, which tells me that I'm going to have a profit of $8,910.48 on the house, which seems all fine and dandy, but remember that you put a bunch of money into it, okay? So let's figure out how much I've put into it in total. So their total cost, let's figure this out. So they were making payments of $1,624.78 for 36 months. So that's how much they put in there. They made a down payment of $12,495. Okay, so they have to add that in there. But then they can take away their profit, right? So they can subtract that because that's money in their pocket. So when you do that, the total cost for them is $62,076.60. So when we compare them to our other couple, we can see that they actually ended up kind of in the hole because they spent more money on their home. But I think it's because they got out earlier. Had they stayed in longer, then you earn more equity in the home. You're going to make more money when you sell it because they opted out so early, right? So you want to make sure that if you're going to buy a home, that you're planning to stay there for a while so that it's worthwhile. Or else you know that the housing market is kind of volatile, so that you could maybe sell again quickly and make a profit. Otherwise, you're going to end up behind in money. So you can go ahead and work on some of the practice questions. Remember that your opinion on buy, lease, rent is up to you completely. You can, as long as you have a good reason, decide whatever you want.